What is up, Algebra 1? We are going on to example 5, our second quadratic equation with the quadratic formula. Getting just a little bit more difficult here. We're following the same steps. First things first, we're going to identify our A, our B, and our C. So taking a look at this, I can see that A is 5, B is 2, and very carefully, C is -1. Okay, A, B, and C. Be careful of your negatives. Step 1 done. Step 2, we're going to plug this into our quadratic formula. Remember, we need to start memorizing our quadratic formula. It is x equals -b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2 times a. So when I'm plugging these in, the first thing I like to do is I leave parentheses in all the spaces so they're easy to plug in. So I have negative, plugging into parentheses, plus or minus the square root, parentheses squared, minus 4ac, so parentheses, parentheses, all over 2 times a, so I'm going to put parentheses. So, working A, B, and then C. A, there's an A after the 4, and there's an A after the 2. So I'm going to plug in a 5 after the 4, and a 5 next to the 2. B, we got 2 of them. 1 in the front, 1 inside the square root. So I'm going to plug in a 2 and a 2. And last but not least, I got C at the end, so I plug in -1. Okay, step 2 is done. Plugged in A, B, and C into the quadratic formula. Now it's time to simplify the discriminant. Okay, the discriminant is everything under the square root. That's everything on the inside. Okay, for short, we just call this D, the discriminant. D equals. And I'm going to do this just by plugging it in to Desmos. I'm going to pull up Desmos and plug all of this in. 2 to the power of 2 minus 4 times 5 times -1. When I plug all of that in, I get 24. Okay, so I'm going to write D equals 24. This is everything highlighted in yellow simplified. Okay, so simplified, perfectly done. Let's do some cleanup. X equals -1 times 2 is -2, plus or minus, everything in yellow is just 24, so put your square root, put in your 24, all over 2 times 5, which is 10. Okay, nice and cleaned up. So let's simplify the square root. So we need to simplify the square root of 24. So let's see if that's a perfect square. So if I go back to that previous slide, 24 isn't on this list. So we need to figure out what we can divide 24 by. And it has to be a number smaller than 24. So 16, 9, or 4. So let's see, what can we divide 24 by? Okay, let's try to divide 24, starting with our largest, divided by 16. Doesn't work. Try dividing by 9. Still doesn't work. Dividing by 4, we get 6. So 24 splits into 4 times 6. So if I go back, 24 is going to split into 4, square root of 4, square root of 6. The square root of 4 can simplify to a regular old 2, and we keep the square root of 6. Okay, so this is our simplified square root that we're going to plug back in. Okay, so we've simplified our square root. Let's rewrite. X equals -2, plus or minus 2 square root of 6 over 10. All right. Now, we need to simplify the top and simplify the bottom as much as possible. Now, when I look at this, I see 3 regular numbers, a -2, a 2, and a 10. All of these can be divided by 2. They can be simplified, so I should do that. Okay, so this is all just going to become x equals negative 2 divided by 2 is negative 1. 2 divided by 2 is 1, so just plus or minus 1 times the square root of 6, so just the square root of 6, all over 5. If you can divide all three numbers by something, you need to do that to simplify it. If you can't divide everything, then you're just going to leave it. So let's split this up into our two solutions. Okay, 1 plus, 1 minus. I'm going to have negative 1 over 5. Okay, I'm going to split this up. Negative 1 plus the square root of 6 over 5. And negative 1 minus the square root of 6 over 5. These are my two possibilities, plus or minus. So my final answer is x equals negative 1 plus the square root of 6 over 5 and negative 1 minus the square root of 6 all over 5. This is my final answer. Okay, these are perfect solutions. Sometimes the problem might ask you to round your answer to the nearest 10th or 100th place. So if it asks you to round, here's how we can round. So let's type in the first one. Okay, the top in parentheses, negative 1 plus the square root of 6 divided by 5. And negative 1 minus the square root of 6 divided by 5. If it asks us to round to the 100th place, we would get 0.29, because the 9 bumps it up, and 0.69. Okay? So 0.29 and 0.69. 0.29 and 0.69 if it asked us to write it as a decimal. And that is it for our second example for quadratic formula. Once again, we identified A, B, and C. We plugged them into the quadratic formula. The highlighted part under the square root is the discriminant. We typed that into our calculator and got 24. And then we cleaned everything up. We simplified our square root by splitting 24 up into 4 and 6, and then taking the square root of 4 to become a 2. Plug that back in. We split it up into our plus and our minus, which are our two perfect answers. And we can type those into Desmos to simplify them and round them to our not so perfect answers, but our rounded answers. And we're done. Great job. See you next time.